Breaking today. The cancer-stricken and desperately ill King Charles III is about to make only the third address to the nation of his troubled reign outside of his Christmas messages to mark what is a bittersweet day, not just for the British royal family, but also the wider disunited kingdom.
On what would have been Queen Elizabeth II's 100th birthday, King Charles III delivered only the third address of his reign, and the moment carried enormous weight. This was not some routine royal appearance. It felt historic, emotional, and deeply symbolic. Speaking from Balmoral's library, a place tied so closely to royal memory, the setting alone sent a powerful signal. Balmoral was where the late queen spent her final days, and returning there for such a major address gave every word even greater meaning. It felt personal, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. The speech itself was brief, but it carried real emotion. Many noticed the strain on the king's face, the reflective tone in his voice, and the gravity surrounding the moment. Images of Queen Elizabeth woven through the address only made it feel even more profound, turning the speech into what many saw as a heartfelt tribute filled with meaning. Charles described his mother as constant, devoted, and unwavering in service. He spoke not only of historic milestones, but also the smaller memories people still hold close. A smile, a kind word, even that unforgettable Paddington Bear moment that touched so many people. He reached back to the Queen's first public broadcast at just 14 during the Second World War, repeating her words about everyone playing a part in building a better and happier world. Then came one of the most talked about moments of all, when he renewed his own pledge of duty and service, ending with deeply personal words to his mother that left many royal watchers stunned. That pledge became the headline instantly, because many felt it was far more than a tribute.
If you listen carefully, you will note that filming had to be paused several times. This has been covered up with images of the late Queen, but they've done a very bad job with the audio.
It sounded like a message. For months, speculation has surrounded the pressures of the crown, especially amid ongoing health concerns. But this address seemed to shut down talk that Charles may be stepping back anytime soon. Observers pointed out that abdication has never been treated lightly within British constitutional tradition. The monarchy is built around duty, and Charles appeared determined to reinforce exactly that. The signal seemed clear. The commitment remains firm. Attention has also stayed fixed on the visible toll recent challenges may have taken. Yet even amid concern, the king continuing major constitutional responsibilities has been viewed by many as a sign of resolve. Some analysts said maintaining demanding public duties projects stability, even while acknowledging serious pressures. Another moment that sparked major discussion was Charles's reference to the troubled state of the world. He didn't single out events or figures directly, but he acknowledged uncertainty in a way that drew immediate reaction. Some saw it as a subtle reflection on global instability, while others viewed it as consistent with the careful, measured language monarchs have often used in difficult times. Either way, people were talking. His reference to the Queen's belief that goodness would prevail gave those words even more emotional force. Rather than sounding political, many felt it came across as a call for steadiness in uneasy times, and that may be why this speech landed with such impact. It wasn't just remembrance. It felt tied to continuity, duty, and a monarchy signaling endurance through uncertainty. At a time when questions continue swirling around the institution's future, Charles used a short address to send a remarkably strong message without raising his voice once. That is why many see this speech as far bigger than a birthday tribute. It may have been brief, but the symbolism felt massive.
He remained constant, steadfast, and wholly devoted to the people she served. Millions will remember her for moments of national significance, many others for a fleeting personal encounter, a smile, a kind word that lifted spirits, or for that marvelous twinkle of the eye when sharing a marmalade sandwich with, "In this I renew my own solemn pledge of duty and service to you all." God bless you, darling Mama. You remain forever in our hearts and prayers.
Acknowledging uncertainty without naming every conflict or controversy was, to many, a constitutional monarch's way of recognizing what people already feel without crossing into politics. And many say that was only the start of the conversation. Then came another layer that stirred even more reaction. Commentary ahead of a major state visit brought fresh attention to what may be happening behind palace walls. Reports suggesting the king may hold strong private views about world figures created immediate buzz, especially because diplomacy at that level is always watched so closely. What made it striking was the suggestion that personal feelings and public duty may move on separate tracks, and many said that is exactly what constitutional monarchy has always required. Whatever happens privately, the public role is about stability, restraint, and duty above personal preference. That's why the upcoming state visit has drawn so much focus. The idea that a monarch can engage warmly on the world stage while setting aside personal views is seen by many as a demonstration of the institution's unique purpose. It's not about personalities, it's about function. And many observers argue that is where the monarchy still shows value in real time. A king can sometimes open diplomatic doors in ways elected leaders alone cannot.
It doesn't exist in our constitution for a start. There was a brief aberration in 1936 with Edward VIII, but it's not part of our system. And for the Queen and for the King, the coronation service was a deeply spiritual moment.
That soft power, that symbolism, that ability to ease tensions through ceremony and personal contact has long been part of the crown's role. Even more remarkable to many is the sense of personal commitment surrounding it all. At a time when public attention remains fixed on the king's health, continuing major duties has been read as a powerful signal of resolve. For supporters, it reinforces the image of duty above comfort. Then came the comparisons that set off even more debate. Because while Charles was being discussed in terms of service, diplomacy, and constitutional responsibility, critics and commentators were painting a very different picture when discussing Harry and Meghan. And that contrast has become harder for many watchers to ignore. On one side, the image projected is one of public duty carried out with little concern for personal gain. On the other, critics argue there has been a blending of humanitarian branding, personal image, and commercial ventures that continues fueling controversy. That contrast became even sharper during the same week. Charles renewing his pledge of service while conversations swirled around product launches and branding created a collision of narratives many called impossible to overlook. And that is why some commentators say this goes far beyond family tension. It touches two very different ideas of what royal identity means. One rooted in service and institution. The other, critics say, tied more to personal reinvention and modern celebrity culture. That debate has only intensified because many see these paths moving in opposite directions, one centered on continuity and tradition, the other often framed through media narratives, image building, and public reinvention. And that contrast keeps driving discussion. For some royal watchers, the timing made everything feel even more dramatic.
Referring to civil unrest here in the United Kingdom, what would be troubling? I mean, gosh, there's a lot that I'm troubled about. Of course, we're in troubled times, but this was a bit of an odd one to me, seeming to want to use his mother to make a political message to suggest the world is not in a good place.
A king renewing a lifelong pledge of duty, while wider debates over image and royal identity continue unfolding, created a moment many say carried enormous symbolic weight. And that may be why this address keeps being described as much more than a speech. For many, it felt like a statement of purpose, quiet, measured, but unmistakably strong. Because in just a few minutes, Charles seemed to remind people what the monarchy believes it represents: endurance, stability, and service through uncertainty. And whether seen as tribute, reassurance, or a declaration of resolve, one thing is clear: this moment landed hard. It sparked debate, stirred emotion, and reopened deeper questions about the crown's future and what royal duty means in a changing world. Then the Queen Elizabeth II memorial debate added yet another dramatic layer to the story. What should have been a near-universal moment of tribute quickly turned into a much bigger conversation about symbolism, legacy, and whether modern Britain still knows how to honor towering figures in truly monumental ways. Some praised the restrained approach, others felt something huge was missing. For a monarch whose reign stretched 70 years and shaped generations, many expected a memorial with far greater scale and grandeur. And the criticism wasn't really just about architecture, it tapped into something deeper. For many, the debate became about confidence. about whether institutions today project the same certainty they once did. Grand memorials of the past carried bold statements about permanence and national pride. Some observers argued modern commemorations can feel more cautious, even hesitant.
What an advantage it is to have a monarchy, because imagine if we were a republic with President Starmer, let alone at home, but of course Starmer has burnt the special relationship with America, and it takes King Charles and later in the year when we get the Prince and Princess of Wales going to America, only the King, William and Catherine, are able to pour oil on those troubled waters.
And to them, that says something bigger about the era itself. That's why the statue debate resonated far beyond art criticism. It became part of a much larger conversation about how the nation sees itself and how it honors a figure many regard as one of the defining public figures of the modern age. Because Queen Elizabeth II's legacy is almost impossible to separate from modern British history itself through geopolitical shifts, social change, crises, and reinvention. Her reign stretched across entire eras, and through all of it, supporters say she embodied discipline, steadiness, and continuity in a way few public figures ever have. That's why emotions remain so strong around how her memory is represented, which is what makes all these stories feel connected. The speech, the diplomacy, the comparisons, the memorial debate, they all seem to circle back to one giant question. What does the monarchy represent now? And right now, that question feels more alive than ever. Because behind every ceremony, every speech, every symbolic gesture, there's a deeper struggle over legacy, identity, and what the institution becomes next. And that's why this story keeps getting bigger. A lot of people said the memorial debate was never really about a statue alone. It became a symbol of something much larger. Some critics used harsh descriptions online, saying it didn't reflect the scale of a 70-year reign at all. And that struck a nerve, because many felt Queen Elizabeth's legacy was too vast to be reduced into something that seemed understated. But what made King Charles's address so powerful was that he didn't try to turn her life into a checklist of achievements.
So it's to the great benefit that we have a very seasoned statesman and diplomat in the form of King Charles, who can basically convene a meeting with President Trump, which will go undoubtedly swimmingly and hopefully smooth some ruffled feathers.
He did something much more personal. He spoke of a smile, a kind word, even that unforgettable marmalade sandwich moment with Paddington Bear. And for many, that said more than any grand speech ever could. It suggested her greatness didn't need explaining. People already understood it. That's why some felt the speech captured what stone and sculpture struggled to hold. In those final words to his mother, many heard something raw and deeply human. Not just a monarch honoring a sovereign, but a son honoring his mother. And that is what made the moment feel so powerful. Because behind the crown, behind the ceremony, behind everything the institution represents, there was grief, memory, and love still present. Many noticed how emotional the address felt, and some pointed to visible signs that it may have taken real effort to deliver. That only added to the weight of it all. At a moment when the country marked a centenary, there was also the image of a king carrying personal strain while renewing public duty. That contrast hit hard, because at the same time these solemn events unfolded, debate was also raging over royal branding, diplomacy, and wider pressures surrounding the institution. It all collided in one extraordinary week. And that's what made this feel bigger than a commemoration. It felt like a snapshot of the monarchy at a crossroads, a king renewing his pledge, a debated memorial, a major diplomatic mission ahead, family contrasts growing louder, all of it unfolding at once. Then there was the Buckingham Palace gathering, which many saw as the living expression of what the centenary was really about. The full presence of working royals honoring the occasion carried symbolism of its own, but one moment especially moved people: Catherine, Princess of Wales's emotional interaction with Tony Gladhill.
As a steaming pile of gilded azure that threatens to bury her descendants. Her 7 decades on the throne, 3 reigns worth of time, inevitably fossilised the monarchy and insulated it from change. Elizabeth II was flawless in conduct, dedicated to duty, and marvellously untroubled by a mutinous inner life.
It wasn't staged. It didn't feel scripted. It felt real. The story that he attended in honor of a promise made to his late wife touched many deeply, and his exchange with Catherine became one of those rare moments where ceremony gave way to something deeply human, and people noticed the warmth in that encounter. Supporters said it showed royal engagement at its strongest, not performance, but presence, a public moment that still felt personal. Catherine's return to duties after major health challenges has added another layer to how many view her appearances now. Some say there's a visible depth in how she carries these moments. And this interaction became part of that growing perception. Observers pointed to the dignity of the exchange, the gentleness of it, and how naturally it unfolded. For many, it reflected the kind of connection royal engagements are meant to create. And that's where comparisons started again, because commentators have repeatedly contrasted moments like this with other public engagements that have drawn mixed reactions over the years. Not because anyone has to force the difference, but because many believe the contrast often reveals itself naturally in how people respond in real time. And that's what made the footage and reactions around various royal appearances part of a much larger discussion. It wasn't just about photographs or headlines anymore, it was about authenticity, about whether an encounter feels genuine to the people living it. That conversation keeps growing because people notice these details. The way someone greets a veteran, the way they respond in unscripted moments, the way compassion shows up when no one can rehearse it. For many, those quiet moments can say more than grand speeches ever could, and that's why they linger.
Working presumably for Buckingham Palace, although she doesn't clarify that, is openly saying that the king has a visceral hatred of Trump.
Because royal symbolism isn't only found in crowns, ceremonies, or state occasions. Sometimes it shows up in a glance, a gesture, a conversation that feels real. And supporters say that's exactly what made those palace moments resonate so strongly. They weren't dramatic because anyone tried to make them dramatic. They landed because they felt sincere. That's also why this wider debate keeps feeding into bigger questions about the monarchy itself, not just what it represents on paper, but how it feels to people watching now. For some, these moments reinforce continuity. For others, they raise questions about what comes next. But either way, they keep the conversation alive, because between the centenary address, the memorial controversy, the diplomatic spotlight, and these personal public moments, many feel they are watching more than isolated events. They're watching competing visions of royal identity play out in real time. And that's why this story refuses to quiet down, because what started as a tribute became a debate. That debate became a reflection on legacy, and that reflection became something even bigger, a conversation about duty, symbolism, and whether the monarchy is redefining itself before the public's eyes. And for many watching closely, that's where things get truly fascinating. The way emotion shows up when cameras aren't the point. That's where many say the real story begins. Those quiet moments often reveal more than official statements ever can. And maybe that's why this centenary week carried so much weight. It wasn't just about remembering Queen Elizabeth. In many ways, it became a reflection on service itself. What does duty look like? What does authenticity look like? What does legacy really mean when tested in real human moments? Those questions were everywhere beneath the ceremonies. And for many watching, the answers weren't found in monuments or headlines, but in small moments. A son's tribute, a quiet, emotional exchange at the palace, a renewed pledge of service despite visible strain. That is what made this feel so much bigger than royal pageantry, because beneath the symbolism was something deeply personal, deeply human, and for many, deeply revealing about where the monarchy stands now. And that's why this story keeps resonating. Because it isn't just about history being honored, it's about legacy being measured in real time. Then another layer made this even more compelling. Revelations about Prince Philip quietly managing serious illness for years added a whole new lens through which many are viewing King Charles III now. For many observers, it created a striking historical parallel. Two royal figures carrying personal burdens while continuing public duty. What stands out is the shared theme of endurance. Philip was often seen as someone who faced difficulty with extraordinary privacy and discipline, and many now see echoes of that spirit in Charles, even if the approach today looks different, because Charles has chosen more openness. But the deeper story many point to feels familiar. A monarch continuing the role despite immense personal strain, determined to carry out duty as long as possible. That's why discussions about his health have become tied so closely to the centenary address and the coming state visit. To supporters, these aren't isolated moments. They're part of a much bigger picture about responsibility under pressure. And that pressure looks enormous, because the idea of continuing major diplomatic obligations while undergoing treatment has only amplified perceptions of sacrifice. Many see that not as symbolism, but as a real demonstration of what the role demands. That's where the upcoming US visit has taken on even greater significance. It's being viewed not simply as diplomacy, but as a test of monarchy's unique role in moment-selected politics alone may struggle to navigate. And that's where the story gets fascinating, because many commentators say this is where the institution shows one of its least understood strengths, not in ceremony alone, but in quiet diplomacy. The argument is simple but powerful. A constitutional monarch can sometimes engage in ways political leaders cannot. Without campaign pressures, partisan battles, or electoral calculations, there is room for a different kind of conversation, and many believe that matters right now. Discussion around possible differences in worldview between Charles and major world leaders has only fueled that point further. Because whatever private views may exist, the expectation remains the same. Public duty comes first. That's the balancing act people keep talking about. A monarch may carry personal convictions, but the institution requires something larger. Warmth in public, neutrality in tone, diplomacy above friction. And many say Charles is now being tested on exactly that stage. What makes it even more dramatic is that some see this not just as diplomacy, but as monarchy proving its relevance in real time. Because supporters argue this is where the crown still does something few other institutions can do: preserve goodwill, lower tensions, and keep relationships functioning when politics alone may struggle to do it. And that idea has sparked huge interest. Because when people ask what practical value monarchy has today, this is often the answer defenders point to: not just pageantry, not just tradition, but influence through presence, symbolism, and carefully managed human relationships. That's a very different kind of power, and many say Queen Elizabeth understood it masterfully. In fact, some argue this may have been one of the most underestimated parts of her reign. Not the visible ceremonies everyone remembers, but the tensions quietly eased, the relationships kept stable, the moments where personal diplomacy prevented bigger problems. Those things rarely make headlines because they often look like nothing happened. But sometimes that is the achievement: nothing breaking, nothing escalating, nothing turning into crisis. That invisible side of statecraft is what many say Queen Elizabeth II practiced with remarkable skill. And now, people are asking whether Charles is trying to carry that forward under much tougher conditions, because many believe the landscape today is harder. Global tensions feel sharper, alliances feel more fragile, public scrutiny is relentless. Every gesture is analyzed instantly, which makes the challenge enormous. And yet that may be exactly why this moment feels so consequential. Because it's not just about whether a state visit goes well. It's about whether Charles can demonstrate the same quiet diplomatic value many believe defined his mother's reign. That's a huge expectation, and it may explain why even seemingly ceremonial moments are being watched so closely. Every handshake, every tone, every signal, people are reading meaning into all of it, because beneath the protocol is a much bigger question. Can the monarchy still do what it once did at the highest level? For supporters, this visit may help answer that. For skeptics, it's a test. For everyone watching, it feels significant, and that's why the story keeps expanding beyond health updates or royal symbolism. It has become about monarchy, diplomacy, legacy, and whether Charles can prove the institution still holds a role only it can perform. And if he does, many believe it won't be through grand speeches or dramatic gestures. It will be through something quieter. The same thing people increasingly say defined Elizabeth herself: steadiness under pressure, calm when tensions rise, presence when words alone are not enough. That, many argue, is where the monarchy either proves its value or faces even harder questions. And this is why so many believe the centenary week carried meaning far beyond remembrance. It became a backdrop for bigger tests unfolding in real time: a king under pressure, an institution under scrutiny, a legacy being measured, and a future many say is being shaped in moments that may look ceremonial on the surface, but carry much deeper stakes underneath. Because some observers say the real drama isn't in what is spoken publicly. It's in whether the monarchy can still do what supporters have long claimed it does best: absorb pressure, project continuity, stabilize through symbolism, and quietly influence outcomes without making a spectacle of it. That's not flashy power. That's subtle power. And many say it may be the hardest kind to preserve in today's climate, which is why every move now feels loaded with meaning. Every appearance, every diplomatic signal, every quiet gesture, it all feeds the same larger question people keep coming back to. What does the monarchy represent now? And can it still deliver what it once symbolized? That is why this story keeps growing. Because it no longer feels only about royal headlines. It feels tied to whether an old institution can still show relevance in a very different world. And many believe that answer may not come through dramatic moments at all, but through something steadier, something quieter, something deeply familiar. The very thing people say defined Elizabeth herself all along. Steadiness under pressure, warmth without surrender, influence without overt power. Many say those ideas sit right at the heart of this moment, and if King Charles III can pull that off while carrying the personal burdens already being discussed, some believe this could become one of the defining chapters of his reign. What makes this even more striking is the deeper this story goes, the less it feels like separate royal developments, and the more it starts looking like one connected picture. The centenary tribute, the health concerns, the diplomacy, the questions around institutional strength, it all feels tied together in a way that has many royal watchers saying something bigger may be unfolding. Because at the center of it all is one unavoidable question. What happens when a monarch under visible strain is asked not only to preserve tradition, but to actively stabilize an institution facing pressure from every direction? That's where the conversation turns intense. For many observers, Charles is not simply carrying out the duties of a sovereign. He is doing so while managing expectations shaped over 7 decades by Queen Elizabeth II, and that burden is enormous, because Elizabeth was not just a monarch. For many, she became the standard by which monarchy itself is measured. Every move now is judged against that legacy, and some say that may be why Charles's centenary address landed with such force. It wasn't only a son remembering his mother. To many, it felt like a statement of continuity under pressure, almost as if he was saying the line has not broken. The duty has not changed, and the institution still stands. That matters because discussion has been growing over whether modern monarchy can project the same steadiness in a far less stable world. And that question keeps surfacing in everything from the memorial debate to the diplomatic mission ahead. Take the state visit alone. Some see it as symbolic. Others see something much larger, a monarch stepping into a delicate international moment and using the oldest tools the crown possesses: presence, restraint, and personal diplomacy. That may sound ceremonial, but supporters argue it can carry real consequences. Because history has often shown tone can matter before policy moves. Personal warmth can ease friction before formal negotiations even begin. And that is exactly why many believe Charles's role here may be underestimated, especially because he is doing this while under the weight of health concerns that would cause many others to step back. Instead, he appears to be leaning in. And for many, that says everything, because monarchy at its core has always sold one central idea: duty is not conditional on comfort. That idea was embodied by Elizabeth. It defined Prince Philip, and many believe Charles is trying to show it still defines the crown now. But here is where the story takes another turn, because while Charles is being framed through duty and institutional continuity, parallel headlines around Prince Harry and Meghan Markle keep feeding a competing narrative about what royalty has become outside palace walls, and the contrast keeps getting sharper. One side is being framed through sacrifice, constitutional function, and inherited responsibility. The other through branding controversies, public relations battles, and questions around commercial identity. Fair or unfair, that comparison is driving enormous discussion, because to many royal observers, it raises a deeper issue than personalities. It raises the issue of meaning. What is royalty for? Is it service, symbolism, platform, personal brand? Those questions sit underneath almost every headline right now, and they may be why this story feels much bigger than a health update or ceremonial anniversary. It feels like a struggle over competing definitions of legacy itself. Even criticism around the memorial fed into that, because people weren't only debating a statue, they were debating whether modern Britain still knows how to honor permanence in an age obsessed with reinvention. That's why reactions ran so emotional, because it touched identity, history, confidence, memory, and then Charles, in that Balmoral address, seemed to cut through all of it with something almost disarmingly simple. Not politics, not grandeur, not the institution speaking about itself, but a son speaking about his mother. And that may be why it hit so hard, because in one short address, all the noise seemed to fall away, and what remained was duty, loss, continuity, service. That is powerful, especially when paired with what many see as visible signs of personal strain, because people respond differently when sacrifice feels real, and many believe that is part of why sympathy around Charles has shifted in noticeable ways. He is no longer viewed only as the long-waiting heir who stepped into history late. Increasingly, some see him as a monarch being tested in ways few expected so soon. And that changes perception, because struggle, when carried visibly and without complaint, can deepen public connection. That may be part of what is happening now. And if so, it could matter enormously for the institution moving forward. Because monarchy often survives not only through constitutional design, but through emotional legitimacy, through people believing those at its center are carrying something serious, something bigger than themselves. That belief matters, and many say Charles is now trying to reinforce exactly that. Which brings this back to the biggest question of all. Could this difficult moment actually become defining for his reign? Some think yes, because crisis often reveals purpose. And right now, Charles appears to be using strain itself to reinforce the very idea of duty the monarchy depends on. That is not weakness. For supporters, that is the argument for relevance. And if the diplomacy succeeds, if the symbolism holds, if the institution continues projecting steadiness through turbulence, some believe this period may later be seen not as decline, but as a crucial reaffirmation. That would be a dramatic reversal from the speculation many began with. And maybe that is why this story has become so gripping, because it contains tension in every direction. Personal struggle, global diplomacy, institutional uncertainty, family contrast, historical legacy, all colliding at once, and at the center of it, an aging king under pressure, still renewing his pledge, still showing up, still carrying the weight. And many say that image may end up mattering more than any headline, because sometimes a reign is not defined by easy years, but by what happens when pressure arrives. And some believe that is exactly what the world may be witnessing now, a monarchy being tested, a king being measured, and perhaps in the middle of all that strain, a defining chapter taking shape in real time. For many watching, that image says more than any official narrative ever could, because whether critics admit it or not, moments like this shape how reigns are remembered, and this may be becoming one of those moments, not through spectacle, but through endurance. And in royal history, endurance has often mattered most of all. He is facing enormous pressure, and that's what makes this final chapter feel so significant. This is not a reign unfolding under calm conditions. It is happening amid unresolved royal tensions, institutional pressures, questions about succession, financial scrutiny, and a political climate many say is far more fractured than the one Queen Elizabeth II navigated for much of her reign, and King Charles III is carrying all of that while dealing with personal health challenges that continue drawing global attention. That's why many observers say the weight on this reign is unlike anything people fully appreciate. Because it isn't one issue, it's many, all converging at once. There are long-running family strains still making headlines. There are questions about the future shape of the monarchy. There are debates about relevance, legacy, and institutional continuity. And over all of it sits the burden of following one of the most iconic sovereigns in modern history. That alone would be enough to test any monarch. But what has made recent events feel so dramatic is that Charles does not appear to be stepping back from that burden. If anything, he appears to be leaning into it. And many say that matters, because critics have speculated for years about whether this reign could be shortened, reshaped, or overtaken by circumstance. But what the centenary address seemed to show was something very different: resolve. That's why so many royal watchers focused not just on what Charles said, but on what the moment itself represented. The setting at Balmoral, the emotion of the tribute, the renewed pledge, the unmistakable sense of personal gravity. It all felt larger than ceremony. Many saw not a monarch preparing to withdraw, but one reaffirming exactly why he intends to continue. And that is a very different message, because in that moment, the conversation shifted from speculation about limits to recognition of commitment. And for supporters of the institution, that was powerful, very powerful, especially because the symbolism of coronation duty still carries enormous meaning inside the monarchy. It is not viewed merely as office. It is understood as lifelong obligation, and many believe Charles made clear he sees it that way. Not as something conditional, not as something set aside when difficult, but something carried to the end. That message came through loudly, and maybe that's why even criticism around the memorial outside the British Museum became part of a larger emotional reaction, because many felt that monument could never fully contain what Queen Elizabeth represented. Some said it lacked scale, Others said it lacked majesty. But beneath all of that was one shared feeling, that her life was bigger than what any monument could capture. And maybe that is exactly why Charles's tribute resonated more than stone ever could. Because memory often lives more powerfully in feeling than in sculpture. And in those direct words to his mother, many believe the truth of her legacy came through far more clearly than any memorial design debate ever could. That was the real monument, some said. The tribute, the pledge, the continuity, and maybe even the sacrifice visible in the man giving it. Because this story, in the end, may not be about whether Charles can match his mother. That may be the wrong question. The real question may be whether he can carry the institution through one of its hardest modern chapters while staying faithful to what he believes the crown requires. And right now, many believe that is exactly what he is trying to do, despite illness, despite scrutiny, despite pressures coming from every direction. He keeps showing up. And that image, an aging king under strain still choosing duty, has become one of the most striking royal narratives in years. Because whatever critics say, endurance commands attention, and history tends to notice endurance. That may be why this centenary moment feels like more than remembrance. It feels like a statement about the future, about whether the old model of service still has force, about whether monarchy still draws strength from sacrifice, about whether continuity still means something in an unstable age. And those are enormous questions still unfolding, questions this reign may end up answering. But one thing feels clear. What we saw at Balmoral did not look like retreat. It looked like resolve. And that may be the biggest takeaway of all. Because whatever challenges lie ahead, Charles appeared to send one unmistakable signal. The pledge stands. And that is why the story has captured so much attention. Because it's no longer just about royal headlines. It's about legacy being defended in real time. And maybe that is what makes this chapter feel so dramatic. Because some periods test institutions quietly, others test them in full public view. This feels like the second kind, a reign being measured under pressure, a monarch carrying expectation few could escape, an institution trying to project steadiness while facing constant scrutiny, and somehow, through all of that, still projecting continuity. For many supporters, that is the story. Not fragility, but endurance. Not retreat, but resolve. Not a crown shrinking under pressure, but a crown trying to prove it still carries weight. And if history later looks back on this stretch as pivotal, many believe it may be because moments of strain revealed purpose more clearly than calmer years ever could. Because crisis can expose weakness, but it can also reveal character. And many believe that is what people feel they are watching now. A test of character, a test of monarchy, a test of whether duty still means what it once meant. And that is why the conversation keeps growing. Because this no longer feels only like commentary about a speech or a centenary. It feels tied to much larger questions about continuity, relevance, and what legacy looks like when challenged in real time. And at the center of it all, an aging king, under strain, still carrying the weight, still renewing the pledge, still showing up. For many, that image may say everything. Let me know what you think in the comments. This story has so many layers, and people are seeing it very differently. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more, share this with someone following the royal drama, and drop your thoughts below. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next, because this story is far from over. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.